Hello, this is Martin Willis, and welcome to the Antique Auction Forum podcast. This is also on my YouTube channel. A lot of people don't see a lot of the antique related things that I do here on this channel, but if you are watching tonight, thank you for being here. I have a real warm spot in my soul for the history of America in general. The Civil War has always fascinated me, and I do have a family connection to that as well. So I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And so my guest is Linda Zimmermann, and I'm really, really excited to have her on. She is a wonderful author, and she spent 30 years looking into a soldier named Albion Brooks. And we're going to be talking about how that all started and all that. And so I want to welcome you all for being here and listening. And thanks so much. And if you're checking us out for the first time, I'll go over to the antiqueauctionforum.com and you'll see lots of podcasts over there, lots of blogs, and there's some blogs also in related Civil War history items there, and Monticello and all kinds of things when it comes to history. Anyway, without further ado, I'm bringing in my wonderful guest and good friend, Linda Zimmermann. Linda, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. And I have to say how much I appreciated when you first learned of my project, how you volunteered to help because you have such an interest in that. And it meant a lot to me, people who wanted to help
Yeah.
the research.
Well, thank you. And I think what I was getting at the time was a book company that just has hundreds of thousands of book titles from all over. You can always research them, and it didn't go anywhere, unfortunately. But it was a thought, because I know how hard it is to do research when you're really trying to dig in deep. But you had some things fall in your lap along the way, and this is I love the way this story begins. And the Civil War, as we talked about off air, is really the first time where there was correspondence and diaries like no other war. Previously, there was, the Revolutionary War, there are some things, but nothing like, they had stampless covers at the time. And we had a mail system during the time. People were mailing things to each, books and everything else during the Civil War. So it was a time where so many things are documented. There are hundreds of thousands of Civil War soldier letters. I've read a lot of them myself. But another thing we're talking about, I heard you say this, you feel like you know the person, and you kind of get into the whole way of their life, and it's right there in their moment. It's just like right here in our moment, when they were writing these things down, all the fears, hopes, and whatever they were going through. But anyway, I want you to tell the story of how you got started in this in the 1990s, and how you stumbled. We often stumble into something that's really great, and I think you did. So why don't you talk about that?
So I was writing about reenactors, both Civil War and Revolutionary War reenactors. And there was a local man I knew who he was a traveling salesman, and but he collected military objects. So I contacted him and I said, do you have anything that might relate to what I'm working on? And he says, not really. He said, but short time ago, he was up near the Finger Lakes region of New York.
Mm-hmm.
And he said there was an old trunk, because he dealt in some antiques as well. And the store owner said, it's filled with papers, and I am tired of going through other people's junk. Those were his exact words. So he said, just take the trunk with the papers. So he's driving around with it for 2 weeks before he even looks at it. And it was over 500 original documents, a who's who of the United States military, from the Revolutionary War, the War of 1812, the Battle of Okeechobee, and the Civil War. It
Amazing.
was three generations of this Thompson's family. And I did compile all that in a book called Forging a Nation. But the one, there's so many people were involved, but the one person who really stood out was this young soldier, Albion Brooks. He had enlisted at age 18. Can you imagine? And yes, there he is. And people writing to him and his letters, everybody loved him. He was such a great guy. Oh, I hope to see Albion soon. Have you seen Albion? Do you have word of him? And I'm like, what a great guy. And just reading his words, you just had an affinity for him. And then I pick up a letter dated June 4th, Cold Harbor, Virginia, 1864, from the chaplain of the regiment. He was with the 8th Connecticut. And it said, I regret to inform you he was severely wounded in an engagement on June 2nd, and the bullet entered his left side and went out over his right hip. So it went, these large caliber, soft lead bullets just tore through him, and they knew he wasn't going to make it.
Right.
He lingered about 36 hours, and with his friends around his bed and the chaplain, they said he looked up, said, I am going, and then said, he was very religious. He said, lo, I am with you even unto the end. And then it said he breathed more slowly till he quietly breathed his last. And I burst into tears because obviously intellectually I know he was not alive in the 1990s.
Yeah.
But to me, it just happened. I was holding the letter that the chaplain wrote who watched him die. And, the man who held that letter to read of the death of his friend. And that was it. I was hook, line, and sinker at that moment.
Wow. And so let's hear, and this is so exciting to me because I know you followed his trail where he went during the war. But let's talk a little bit about what you learned about him to begin with.
Just initially that he lived with his sister in Bridgeport, Connecticut. He joined the 8th Connecticut, so I thought he was all, Connecticut. He was killed at Cold Harbor, Virginia, so I assumed he was buried in the Cold Harbor Cemetery. So I went down there, talked to, people who worked for the park system, National Park System. Couldn't find him, and I was afraid he was one of the thousands of people who, anonymously buried. And I spent years trying to find out, I went to Bridgeport. What little I had back in the early 90s, you didn't go to the Civil War soldiers database on the internet and look it up. It was, the old days. So finally one day, when the internet was, getting started, it said somebody had a picture of him, which was huge. I immediately printed it, and it's been on my desk ever since, to be able to look into his face. And it said he was buried in Kingfield, Maine. Like, wait, what, lived in Connecticut, born in a Connecticut regiment, but he was born in Maine.
I know right where that is.
Oh, beautiful.
I did an appraisal up there. Yes, in the middle of nowhere, though. But there is, ski mountains or something near there, I think.
Yeah. The mountains are stupendous. It's along the Carabasset River. It's breathtakingly beautiful. But, he was born in 1843. There probably wasn't a whole lot out there then.
There's not a whole lot now.
No, that's a good point.
There's that one little hotel downtown. I don't know if you stayed there, but that's I
can never get a room there. I don't know if it's still open. I usually stay in Bangor and then just drive the hour in. Yeah. But he, bit by bit, little bits were coming out. He was orphaned at age 9, and his sister Emily was a part-time school teacher, which they don't make they didn't make much money,
Mm,
but she took him in. And so, she adopted him, and she ended up marrying somebody who moved to Bridgeport, Connecticut. So that's
mm.
how he ended up there.
Ah,
And then um just little bits were coming out, and of course I was learning all I could about the 8th Connecticut. But just a few years ago, someone came out with a regimental history on the 8th Connecticut, which was an absolute treasure trove.
oh yeah.
And then just early last year, I'm doing another search, and I see that Penn State University archives have the Albion Brooks collection. So what? So what?
Now, did they
And
have that? Was that something that had been recently donated, or did they have it for a long time?
it had been donated in the last several years.
Ah, uh-huh.
It
Well,
certainly had
kismet for timing, though, right?
just everything within about a 12-month period came together.
Hmm.
And it was descendants of, he did not have children, but descendants of his sister Emily. That the family was nice enough. Ed and Nancy Thompson invited me to their home near Scranton, Pennsylvania, and to look at the family archives. It it was like, what is this? The National Archives? I mean, stacks and stacks of boxes and binders. It was the finest personal family collection of records I've ever seen. And they had decided Albion was important enough to take all of that and devote it and, give it to Penn State, donate it there so that people could then research him. And so I got his letters. I got his, at age 16, to give you an idea what he was like. At age 16, on his birthday, he writes, "I will here commence a history of my life."
Hmm. Oh, how about that? Who talks like that, right?
I know, I know. And it's just a whole list of where he lived, who his teachers were, where he had been, and I mean, who gets that? A blow by blow description of his first 16 years. And
That's
then he
awesome.
started keeping diaries and writing letters. And so I pretty much know, you pick any day in his life and I can tell you where he was and what he was doing. It was just breathtaking, the amount of material that came to me. And the more I read, the more I liked him, the more I loved this guy. And I realized, in order to really tell his story, I wanted to follow his footsteps from his grave in Maine through the battlefields of Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina. I traced everything. And they were very powerful moments, standing where he stood,
Right.
getting shot at, watching his friends, die.
Yeah.
And then
Talk about that one particular case. There were three of his friends. He was only 3 feet away from him. What battle was that? And can you
that
go
was
into
that, yeah, that
detail?
was Antietam.
Antietam. Yeah, the big
Yeah,
one. Yeah.
yes, September 17th, 1862, when he was on the Rohrbach farm. People interested, they can look that up. And he writes home that a cannonball comes in and killed 3 fellow soldiers. He was just 3 feet away from them.
Mm.
And so, if you've read the book, every single name mentioned I have to look into.
Uh-huh.
And one of those men that was killed, I found a Hartford Courant newspaper article announcing his death. And they said, no, he didn't get struck by the cannonball. He was lying flat on the ground because the artillery's flying over their head. But
Mm.
this big cannonball hits the ground in front of him, goes into the ground, and comes out behind him. But the concussion,
Right.
the force of the
Yes.
ground move, that's what killed him.
Amazing. Internal bleeding, the whole thing, I'm sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so he was 3 feet from that.
Yeah.
The number of close calls he had at New Bern, he said, well, I was hit by a bullet just enough to make my finger bleed. But another inch one way or the other, and that could have been it.
Right. And those mini balls were really something. They some of the accounts I've read about them, hearing them whistling by their ears.
Yes.
I mean, you read some of the letters and it's like, whoa, really, really, really something.
Yeah, his 1864 diary, and he had been at Antietam, at Fredericksburg, but the farther they got closer towards Richmond, he said, I never heard the bullets fly so thick around me as it is now, as the resistance got stronger and they got closer, and it just became more and more deadly. Grant's Overland Campaign, in 6 weeks, there was 88,000 casualties.
It's just, when you think about the Civil War and you think about the 600,000 deaths, I had a historian on, I'll talk about that in just a second. But, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that something like a third of them or maybe even more, had to do with diseases and other issues, not not battle reasons. But the historian that I had on my podcast once made a very good point. He thought he had a thought. I don't know if it's true or not, but if those 600 people were not killed during the Civil War, that the United States would have almost 1 billion people now.
Never thought of it that way.
Mathematically, he went through that. So yeah. So I saw a question here. Let me just see. Because I thought it's interesting. How does the public memory of this event differ from the actual primary source reality? And I want to say that in general. I mean, I'm sure you researched these things, but now you're looking through a soldier's eyes when he's writing about it. Were there differences that you could palpable or not?
Yes. Of course, newspaper accounts generally in history books portray it with a lot more bravado, and the gallant soldiers. They were miserable, they were cold, they were wet, they were sick. They knew the blunders of the generals, like, oh no, this guy's like the Bermuda 100 campaign, which was a complete disaster. Benjamin Butler was in charge, and they're like, oh boy, we were hoping for this general, we got Butler. And
I remember hearing something about that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
you're at the mercy. You're
Mhm.
putting your life on the line every day. And these incompetent generals, which unfortunately the Union had quite a lot of, particularly at the beginning of the war, and that's your life or death. You're going where they send you. And so, from the boots on the ground perspective, it was just a grueling, brutal struggle every day, So I think when we look back, the glorious victory at Gettysburg. Yeah, let's look at it from the soldier who had his, leg shot off, or watched his friend die, or just the terror. Can you imagine all these artillery shells bursting over your head? Chunks of iron flying everywhere.
And I mean, and some of these stories, if you read them, or just I can't remember exactly which battle it was, but they were like all trapped below in this area, and it was a slaughter. It was
the Battle of the Crater.
Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, they were trying to breach the Confederate fortifications and mined under and blew it up.
That's exactly
it. And they ran into
Yep.
the crater and didn't bring ladders.
Yep, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Right, right. Yeah. No, I don't live that far during the winter to Fort Sumter, where it all began.
Yes.
And I didn't realize this. I was listening to a history podcast, but I didn't realize that as soon as Abraham Lincoln was elected and voted in, and they knew he was voted in, that's when South Carolina uh, voted to secede. I thought it was like further down the line, but it was exactly then. I mean, I just found this out last night, and I was staying in Columbia, South Carolina, and that's right where it happened, right in the Capitol building right there. But anyway, if you don't mind, I'm going to take a quick little jag here, and we'll get right back to the story. And that jag is, I'm going to talk a little bit about my connections, my family connections, if that's okay, because I have kind of an interesting story. I think it's very fascinating. I told you about this before, but this was a relative of mine. It was my great, I don't know how many greats exactly, but his name was William James Hipp. He was Company F, 44th South Carolina. And so anyway, here's some records here. This is basically my great grandparents. And the lady there, she was poisoned by a slave who was hung later in South Carolina. And then the gentleman to the left, who was my relative, he was a Confederate and an Army. And right here it says, grandfather had his arm shot off. This is a ledger back in the turn of the 20th century. Grandfather had his arm shot off in the Civil War. A Negro boy found him, took him to his house, and nursed him back to health. When he came home, he taught a Negro school for a while. I mean, when I read that, it was like, can you imagine? He was fighting to protect slavery, and then he ends up, seeing the good people and, turning his life around and doing the right thing. So I just love that, when I found that little tidbit of history in my family, I was quite amazed. Now, I just got to tell you one thing. After this time, he became a cabinet maker. Now, I've done a lot of woodworking myself, and I can't imagine, and our family still has a couple of pieces that he made. I'm going to pull them up here. This is to the left side of the screen here for those of you watching on YouTube. I'll also put these somehow in the show notes or something, but that's a pie safe that he made with the pierced in doors. And to the right is a Southern pine blanket chest, basically. It's almost Queen Anne style with a base like that, and dovetails. And I have made dovetails before with 2 hands, 2 arms, and and all those moldings and everything, so difficult to do. So I can't imagine someone with 1 arm creating these things, but that's what his profession ended up being.
That's an amazing story. And yes, to go from fighting to preserve slavery to teaching Black kids. Wow, what an incredible story.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, that was so heartwarming. I mean, and there are other stories, untold stories. And I did do some research and found, yes, it did say, just to say he lost his arm at the Battle of Frazier's Farm, also called Glendale, on June 29th through 30th, 1862 in Virginia. Never heard of the battle itself, but there's so many. There were so many.
Oh, so thousands, right?
So let's talk about your battlefield search. And you mentioned about standing right where these things happen, and you got to have all these feelings coming through you, because it just the time is the only difference between when it happened but being right there. And let's talk about some of the places you went and what you thought about them.
Well, Antietam was amazing because, as you said, the documentation is incredible. Minute by minute where these regiments were. And so if you're familiar with Antietam at all, it's on the south end of the battlefield where the 8th Connecticut crossed. He writes, we crossed some creek. He didn't know it was called the Antietam Creek. And he said, we went up one hill and we went up another hill, and you can walk that. It's called the Final Attack Trail. I call it the final heart attack trail because, oh my God, you can imagine them carrying these heavy guns and all their ammunition and everything else and just climbing these hills.
And
And
plus
you,
their boots, no one ever knows this, but their boots and things, the way they were made, they didn't have left and right. Your foot is the one that shaped that. And they were so uncomfortable and so, I mean, anyway, yeah, keep going. This is exciting. So
yeah,
these trails, you think about what they're carrying and amazing because
right.
they had to, a thing, I don't want to go too far off, but a thing that no one ever thinks about is you got to feed these guys. You got to have food. You got to have all their supplies.
Hmm.
It's got to be all going with them. And that's, so they had to do all this and up these hills. It all had to be brought up the hills. The cannons,
Oh,
if they were
yeah.
doing that, all amazing.
Yeah. So you see the terrain. The first time I went in the winter, even though the battle was in September, because once the leaves are off the tree, you really can appreciate the terrain. So
Mm,
going up these hills, and I know where they ended up, their farthest point, they were headed toward Sharpsburg. And he writes, once we got over the second or third hill, we got up to the top, and basically there's the Confederate army standing right
mm.
there.
Oh God.
And yeah, he said the dust and bullets were flying everywhere, and how he didn't get hit they were getting taking on fire from three different uh, locations, and they finally had to retreat. Um, but even a year and a half later, he wrote in his diary, "The cannon of Antietam still thunders in my ears."
Whoa.
Yeah, that's like PTSD, right? I
Yeah.
mean, which wasn't recognized. I mean, to still be haunted, and all the engagements he was in, since then. But Antietam was they were kind of left to hang out to dry because the regiments who were supposed to go up with them didn't, and they were about a half mile in front of their line, taking fire from every angle. um, so how they all didn't, but they lost close to half their regiment in that one day. And he writes a quick 2 days later, he writes to his sister, "Had an awful engagement, but I'm okay. Lost, half our men." And he gives a more detailed, once I guess the shock was over, he wrote a more detailed letter home. But to walk that trail, like almost exactly where he was, and get to that point, and you look around you, and in your mind's eye, you can just picture it. And those are very powerful moments you never get from a book.
Right.
um
Linda, so I'm going to kind of put you on the spot because we didn't talk about this.
okay.
uh, is there any way you can get to part of a letter so we can hear him talking, that you can read us?
I can, if you give me a moment, get to let me see. What would you like to hear something from Antietam? Here
Uh,
we go.
okay,
Oh,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. Um, so this was a couple of weeks later. "Dear brother and sister, the tumult and smoke of the fight is past, and to us soldiers, even now the sights of misery and blood are beginning to fade from our minds. Not but what we pity those of our comrades who fell, or who are now suffering from wounds, but because 1 year of service changes men to such a degree that we take everything as a matter of course." Um,
Wow.
I could read more, but this, let me point out, is a 19-year-old boy.
Unbelievable. I mean,
Yes.
sounds like so much more mature.
Yeah. Let me just read that one episode. He
Yeah.
writes, "In the morning, the cannon began to play when the first we knew a cannonball struck in our ranks, killing 3 men and wounding 1. The men killed were about 3 feet from me."
Hmm. Yeah.
And you imagine his sister reading, you know, this was a kid who she devoted her whole life to.
Mm,
She was his sister, she became his mother, she was also his school teacher, and you can just feel this pull that she must have had. She couldn't protect him. He was
right.
just on his own, and that helpless feeling of the people at home. He writes in fact, his last diary entry, he says, the misery this war has caused in the hearts of our New England family.
Mm,
And a couple of days later, he was killed.
right. I was hiking one time in New Hampshire, in Northampton, New Hampshire, and I came upon a cemetery in the middle of the woods. So at one time there was a house there, and you know, and I saw three brothers, right, dates, all killed in the Civil War, during the
Oh,
Civil War. So I mean, you just can't imagine what a family like would go through like that. But
mhm.
what about any? I do remember, because I've read, some of this book, and I loved the book, by the way.
Oh,
Absolutely loved the book.
thank you.
You did such a wonderful job. And what about the holidays? What does he say about being away for the holidays, like Christmas and things like that?
Well, his first holiday away was Thanksgiving. He enlisted in November of 61. And he writes to his reverend back in Bridgeport, and he said, well, here we are, we poor soldiers down in Dixie, and you at home having turkey. And he said, they called it salt horse. It was not horse. It was, salted beef, which apparently was horrible. And of hardtack that,
Hardtack, yeah. Hmm.
which could have been used as a weapon. And he said, so here we soldiers are with our hardtack and salt horse. And he said, but so be it. I have a job to do, and I'll, here I am, and I have to do it.
So he
Um,
rose up pretty quickly from a private all the way to what?
Sergeant.
Yeah. So that was, so he was someone they respected.
Absolutely. And apparently, from what I read from people who wrote after his death, he was about to get a lieutenant's commission
Mm,
had he not been killed at Cold Harbor. But how he became sergeant was because at Cold Harbor, I think almost all the sergeants were killed.
mm.
So advancement could be overnight, unfortunately, and not the way you wanted it. Um,
Now,
but
does he talk about? I'm sorry to interrupt
Yeah,
you
go
there,
ahead.
but
Go ahead.
no. All right, let's talk about the beginning. Okay, so he enlists out of Connecticut, and if I remember right, he's on a ship going south. Is that
Yes,
how that works? So,
Burnside's North Carolina expedition, which trying to requisition equipment and things, and we all know how people take advantage in times of war, and
hmm,
so they were selling the US government river ferries that were leaking and had no business carrying troops and equipment down the East Coast. And this expedition went down the East Coast to the Outer Banks, which he describes as the most desolate place on Earth. It's just a thin strip of sand which shifts with the tides, and yet people build houses
oh
still
yeah,
there.
it's big money. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But they hit storms. This was January of 62, and they're trying to get through the Hatteras Inlet.
Mm.
And you can imagine an Atlantic storm tossing these ships around for weeks. Some of them, the how he didn't get seasick. I won't get into the descriptions of the seasickness of the thousands and thousands of men. Um,
But they really had not much training at all, right? I mean,
No,
very little training.
no, you're marching around, and he'd never been on a ship like that. Maybe he'd been on a ferry. He was, he wasn't born on the Maine coast. He wasn't, a lot of these men had seafaring experience. They were mariners, but a
Mm.
lot of them, this was their first time on a ship. And they went to Roanoke Island,
Oh yeah.
which, is so famous for
The
its
very first, yeah,
right
settlement there. Yeah.
colony. But that was the first Union victory for him, on Roanoke Island, and they went to New Bern. I don't know if you know New Bern, North Carolina,
Hmm.
at Fort Macon. So I traced all of those places, but one of the earliest letters I ever read was, "Oh, I hear Albion was at New Bern. Ask him if his knees did not shake when the shot and shell came whistling around his head."
Oh my
That.
goodness. Yeah.
So, yeah, so it's not talked about very much, but it was crucial for the Union to be controlling the coastline. Um,
Oh yes. Hmm.
and there's not a lot. Fort Macon looks like it did back in the 1860s, and some of these other places, all there is a sign. But still, it's important to stand on that land and get the perspective of what went on there.
So what battlefield, I would say, ask you, surprised you the most, either emotionally or historically?
Surprised me. Yeah, okay. Well, no, that's a good question. Obviously, Cold Harbor was the most emotional because that's where he
Mm.
died. But
Hmm.
the siege of Suffolk, which I didn't know much about, Suffolk, Virginia, there was one engagement there, the Hills Point Battery, which was absolutely remarkable. It was an earthen fort that the Confederates had done on the narrow Nansemond River. So no ships could go by because, they'd blast you to bits. So they needed to take out this fort. So they disguised a ferry, put this like canvas over a ship so you couldn't see it was filled with Union soldiers, and they're headed towards this fort, but you can't go in front of it because you'll be destroyed. And it hits an underwater something and pushes the ship towards the guns. And this heroic action of they ram the ship onto the mud banks, and they put the gangplanks down, and those float away. So they just jump into this mud and water up to their chests, and soaking wet and muddy and screaming, they run towards the fort and take it in 10 minutes.
Oh my goodness.
It's like I had never heard of this. And so I had to go there. Unfortunately, in the last year or two, it was pristine area. Now there's a massive housing development right up to the edge of the fort. But I went to that little point, and I'm looking. The embankments are still there that the Confederates built,
Oh,
and I'm looking. I'm like, well, and then under the weeds you realize you're following with your eye this circular embankment, and that's the fort. And standing there looking at the river, the transport was right there. They came running right, the whole thing. And I just got goosebumps. It was a moment where it's like you're transported back in time and can envision the whole scene.
would you say that visiting the sites actually changed your understanding of what he was experiencing?
It certainly deepened yeah, because reading about it is intellectual, standing there is visceral.
Hmm.
You you really I keep saying you connect to it, but you do. And you're like, oh my God, how close this was, or how far they had to go, or how steep this was. And when you're trudging up those hills, and you're physically experiencing, to some minor degree, of course, you're not getting shot at, but once you're out there in the field and you're physically doing these things in the same spot, it really intensifies your whole appreciation and understanding.
If you had to guess how many miles he actually walked during this period, would you be able to come up with a number?
I could probably put something together. There was one, a blackberry raid along the peninsula in Virginia, and they marched 153 miles in
Gee,
like 7 or 8 days,
incredible,
something like
incredible.
that. And the regimental history on the 8th Connecticut had a lot of that, 23 miles this day, 17 miles the next day. And the heat, he jokes, he's like, yeah, they're marching 18 miles in Virginia heat in the summer, and he quips it's hot enough to roast a pig. And
Plus
they're
mosquitoes. That's a thing. I don't know if he talks about mosquitoes, but there's a lot of people that talk about mosquitoes back then,
he
especially around
was
the Capitol. It was really bad around
Yes,
there.
his nemesis was the North Carolina fly. He said once it commence biting you, it doesn't give up. And he
Must be
was
like a horsefly or something.
yeah, it's a big nasty looking fly, and he was stationed into the Dismal Swamp area for quite a while, and yeah, few bugs there that bit.
Um, so I guess I want to ask you, in your trek, I know Cold Harbor was really something for you, but was there anything that you felt like was really powerful, other places that you just like after you went there, you were really thankful that you went?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So much. Um, I had I had been to Fredericksburg many
Mhm.
times before, but once I knew where he was, and they slept on the street the night before the Battle of Town, and I know exactly where he was when he was in line to take that horrific trek across the open field, which was just a complete slaughter, uh, thousands of men. And uh, he was like that close to, they just called it off before they were about to march across, and
Wow.
the chances of him surviving that unscathed were, and very low. But yeah, that was very emotional. And then I found through the documents that he did not realize his brother was there, his brother William with the 16th Maine.
Oh, at the
Um,
same battle?
the same battle.
Wow.
And just as he was about to step across the field, his brother was severely wounded on the left end of the Union line. And in fact, one of his, soldiers came up to him and said, "Oh, I'll take your sword and give it to your family and tell them how you died," because
Ooh.
he was so severely wounded and they couldn't take him from the field. He spent the night on the field,
Mm.
and every time he moved they were shooting at him. So he had a terrible wound in his leg and his shoulder, and he had to lay there perfectly motionless
Oh,
so they
unreal.
wouldn't shoot at him. So I went to that area of the field, and I'm covered in goosebumps now thinking these two brothers there, one about to cross the field at the same time, the other one almost dying. And unfortunately, I don't have that letter or that diary entry. It's missing as to did they get to, did Albion get to visit William at the hospital? What point did he find out? Did he think he was going to lose his brother? So it's one thing when you have to worry about yourself, but he had great concern for his brother. He was the younger brother, but he always had this intense fatherly like concern for his brother William. So he did survive and lived a long life, but
Was he also adopted by the sister?
no, he was older.
Oh, I
And
see.
he was in school at that point, much older. Albion was the child of his father's second wife. So his father and the first wife had 4 children. Then she died, and he married the sister. I guess that happened.
That's
a
pretty
lot.
convenient. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, hey, next. Yeah, next in line. And so he was much younger. So he was the child of the second wife. So everyone else was, considerably older. So they were grown, going to school and things like that. And, you had mentioned to me about the image you had of the California gold rush.
Oh, yeah.
Both his brothers, William and George, in the 40s went out to the gold rush. In fact, his brother George ended up staying out there. He loved the West.
Yeah. Happened to a lot of them that went out there.
Yep. And his brother William made enough money gold mining to put himself through college when he came back. But the ship, the America, that was it the Central America that was lost with all the gold on board?
Oh.
William was supposed to take that ship back and got delayed and took a different ship. Otherwise, he would have been lost at sea.
Wow.
There was just so many rabbit holes to jump into, and I wanted to know it all because their experience was part of his experience. Can you imagine this young kid reading about the adventures of his older brothers out in the gold rush? These were exciting and dangerous times.
If only you could go back and have a conversation. Wouldn't that be something if you could just have an hour?
10 minutes, just to look at him and hear his voice and see him smile. Yeah, it's not that I haven't thought about that every day for 30 years, but I had the next best thing. I read his letters and diaries.
Yep. And if someone hasn't done that, they don't understand how, when they were writing these things, they sometimes, like a diary, they never really expected anyone to really read it. People are just, emptying their mind and writing, or a personal letter to someone, but it just feels just like they're having a conversation. And
absolutely.
And that little, what you wrote, I would love to hear some more, because that is just unbelievably written, and it does show, so much about a person, the way they're talking there, like he did. Did he ever mention in any of the letters that you're aware of anything about fear or courage, or was there anything other than the 3 people getting killed beside him, and you talked about him laying down and the bullets going over him? Were there a lot of letters that mentioned that type of situation?
I think for his sister's sake, he didn't give the real gruesome details. But he never felt self-pity. He never talked about being scared out of his mind. Maybe he was, but he never recorded it. He, as I said, he was very religious, and he said, "I thank God for keeping me from fear." Certainly he had some dark moments, but for the most part, he was just very single-minded and determined, and whatever suffering came, he was going to endure it because, again, he had a job to do, and that was it. Some of his most amusing, I can try looking this up quick. He, even though he was still part of his 3-year enlistment, he re-enlisted for another 3 years at the end of 64 when he only was 2 years in. And they get part of the dangling, oh, come on, just sign here. The
Yeah,
war is
yeah.
almost over. They gave him a furlough. He got to go back to Bridgeport for a month.
Oh, wow.
And, but yeah, then he realized, now I have to go back. And he, yes, so he writes, he, so here I am with the absence of all that makes many happy and comfortable. When they're, I love that line, the absence of all that makes many happy and comfortable. He's in Wallingford, Connecticut, and the troops are gathering to go back to the battlefield. And he says, we just within sight of home, cooped up in this prison. We think of the beds, the friends, the girls, and the others that we left behind, and the shade of all the colors of the rainbow over our faces. We sit down to our rations of salt horse and bread, and how we do think of the table just 10 or 12 miles from here. Why did we enlist is the cry that goes forth. Why did we go with the army for 3 years longer? Oh, may the sun shine on our heads. May the everlasting rocks howl and split. May the hills jump up and yelp. May I be older, at least a day or two, before I enlist again to be shut up in an old coach factory in the Nutmeg State. Written by Brooks, when said Brooks was in a very dejected state of mind from the absence of all that makes many happy and comfortable.
Wow. Now, was that in his diary?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like
Yes.
a diary entry.
I mean, is that remarkable? Not, oh, how stupid.
Amazing.
It's like it's poetry.
It is poetry. And
Yes.
there were a lot of people writing more or less poetry then,
Yes.
you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And the one thing that he says in a couple of entries, I feel a pull stronger now than the first time I enlisted, because when I mentioned, he said, the this, the that, the girls, he had never, ever in any of his writing mentioned any girlfriend, any
Oh,
interest in
yes.
girls, but he met somebody on furlough. All I know is her name was Mary B.
B. Yeah.
I
We want
don't
to know
know
what
who
happened to
she,
Mary B.
I absolutely, absolutely do. So he was in love, and they never met again.
I wonder if
Um,
she ever knew of his outcome. She probably assumed.
I would think, because, Bridgeport Society, she was probably a member of his church or a friend of the family, and I'm sure word spread. But yeah, so I'm very sad for him. He finally fell in love and never
Yeah.
got to get married, have children like everybody else did.
Very sad. You mentioned his sister Emily, Chaplain Moses Smith.
Hmm.
And so, what were the people like that were around him that basically shaped who he was?
Emily was a remarkable woman. I say she's the unsung hero in this book, because 19th century women, mid century, you got married, you had children, period.
Hmm.
And she kept, fortunately, I have, thanks to the family collection, her early letters. No, I want a career. I want to make something out of myself. I want to be someone. Unheard of. Unheard of.
Yeah. Yeah.
And her father was a school teacher, and she wanted to be a school teacher and go on to bigger and better things. And family members are like, no, just toe the line. And she's like, no. And there was an uncle Nathan, excuse me, who like, oh, let the girl alone. She wants to do something with her life. Let her. So, people did give her encouragement, and to go out on your own as a young woman in the mid 1800s. And then a lot of them, when the mills were starting in Massachusetts,
Right.
the fabric
Lowell
mills.
area. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yep, Lowell. She was there. Her sister was there working in the mills, and she became an independent woman, which those words
Yeah.
for that time period are remarkable. So she was a rock. She was an innovator. She obviously had a great influence on him. She was his teacher. She was very well spoken, very well educated. So he couldn't have been brought up by a better person than
But
Emily.
he lived in a post office for a while. Did you talk about that?
Oh, I can't believe it. Yeah, the man Emily married, like, she says, I want to take. So that was kind of a bombshell. Yes, I'll marry you, but I'm bringing along my little brother.
Uh-huh. Yep.
I'm sure he
Good for
was
her.
thrilled.
Yeah.
Yes. He's like, oh yeah, that's great, but can't we maybe find some place for him for a while? So he was hired out to a farm for a while, but when he was 14, his brother-in-law's father was postmaster in South Reading, Massachusetts, which later became Wakefield.
Mm-hmm.
And so he needed some help in the post office. So Albion for 2 years worked there. And the family had a really nice house a couple of blocks away, but he didn't stay. They didn't, for whatever reason, let him stay in the house. He stayed in the post office. So for age 14 and 15, he lived all alone in a post office. Heartbreaking. This was a tough childhood.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
But all the
so
people around him loved him.
they did.
That's what you hear. I mean, that's what I got out of this book and what you discovered.
Yes.
Like
Yeah,
he
they are.
stood out. He stood out. He was someone different. And
he-
that's one of the reasons you got so involved in this.
Yeah, from just a few letters. And you can see by the way he writes,
Yeah.
as a writer, I
Yeah.
appreciate the way he writes, and you can hear the way his mind works when he chooses these words, and it was just stunning. But yes, everybody absolutely loved him and was absolutely devastated after he died. And the only way his body was found and brought home was because he had three people with, who buried him and made sure, they couldn't erect stones. They just took wooden boards
Right.
and would
Mm-hmm.
scrape or ink the names, and they said, we know exactly where he is. It's a well marked board. They made sure, even in the midst of, Cold Harbor on June 3rd, 6,000 Union troops fell in 1 hour.
Amazing.
So the
Just terrible.
carnage, yeah, the carnage was horrific. They took the time to make sure his grave was marked very well. And after the war, one of those soldiers, Alfred Howes, wrote to the family and said, I know exactly where it is. In fact, he had visited the site a couple of times, so he kept going back to Albion's grave. And he said, it's still well marked. Come to Richmond. I'll take you there. And they did. And they transported his body the 700 and something miles to Kingfield so he could be buried in the same cemetery as his parents.
That's great. I mean, it's not a good story, but it's a good ending, as good as it can be. So I'd like to post this comment because I want to comment on it because just because I know a little bit about something here. People back then didn't smile much in pictures or paintings because they didn't have much to smile about. Well, I'll argue that a little bit, Duckhead. Thank you for that comment. Because photography, you had to stay very still. And with paintings, you'll see a lot of paintings, early paintings. I agree. A lot of early paintings, people are very solemn looking, but in the late 19th century during the Civil War, they had ambrotype, the daguerreotype first, and then ambrotype came, and then tintype. So through the Civil War, you didn't have very much as far as daguerreotype, but you had ambrotype and tintype, and they had to sit very still. There were the 2-minute exposures. So I actually had a chair for years that was a photographer's chair with a little brace and everything to hold you still. So
Yes.
there was no smiling to take those long exposure pictures. And so that's basically because your smile is, if you try to smile, your mouth goes all over the place and you just have a blur there in the picture. Sorry to
But
take a
now,
little jack.
yes, but now we have AI, and a
Yeah.
friend of mine, Mike Warden,
Oh, yes. I got to see if
had
I can find that picture. But
yes, had the video. If you could show that,
oh, that's right. It's a video. All right, let me look for that. So if you would, let's continue on though, and let me see. I just had some. So we talked about Mary B, and we don't know exactly whatever happened to her.
no.
Um, did he have a lot of really good friendships in service members that were with him that he talked a lot about?
He didn't mention a lot of people here and there, but from what other people wrote, he was just beloved by everyone. The chaplain, he was very close with, the captain, the officers. He got along with the new recruits. He was just somebody who could relate. He had been orphaned. He was alone a lot. He worked hard as a kid, so he could relate to the ordinary common soldier, but he had enough education and the brilliant mind that he could mingle easily with the officers. So once or twice he'd mention, "Oh, Peter and I went down the river and we got shot at," and something like that. But I do want to mention something I think which is very illustrative of what the war was all about. When he first enlisted, he wrote home and he said, "Oh, I have a fine lot of men in my tent." There were 4 of them, and he named them, and I was able to look them up. So out of the 4 original men, 1 was captured, 2 were wounded, 1 was killed.
Hmm.
So none of them, got through unscathed. There's such optimism. Everybody thought the war would be over in a few months.
That's right.
And
Yep.
right. And
if Lee had gone the other way, it might have happened.
yes.
He had a
Yep.
choice to make overnight, and he was asked to, because he was such a brilliant soldier and leader,
Mhm.
that he possibly, the war could have been over very quickly, but he made the choice to join the other side.
Yep.
So I did find what you're talking about, and I'm going to try to do it, but I have to convert it. It won't play. It won't play like this.
Okay.
So, but anyway, it's fun. But so while I'm waiting and trying to convert this thing, let's talk about. I guess what was the most surprising thing of all the, what, just besides you reading the fact that, the letter came that he passed away, was there anything that really shocked you that you just weren't expecting to read?
Not that I can think. Well, when he said, I've just written to Mary B. I'm like, wait, what?
Oh, okay, yeah. Uh-huh.
Very conservative, religious young man who showed no interest. And I was continually surprised. You know what went on in army camps then and today, I'm sure. But, the gambling, the womanizing, the
Oh, yeah.
drinking. He's writing home, "Could you please send me a book of algebra?"
Unreal.
and I'm studying Greek and Latin with the chaplain at night, and I'm like, who is this man? I mean, it was just remarkable. And so he's going around, tramping around the country with his school books, Greek, Latin, and algebra, to study. That continually surprised me because I kept waiting. You kept waiting for the moment where, I got drunk, or, yeah,
Yeah.
there was this woman, or
Yeah.
I lost my paycheck. Never. He was unwavering in his faith. He was unwavering in his beliefs. He was just like superhuman. That didn't, one of the uh, people who wrote to his sister after his death said, like, he did not, fall into any bad habit during the war. In fact, people said he was an even better person, you know, by the time of his death. So how you can be thrown into such misery and chaos and improve yourself, become a better person in the midst of all that, it's one in a million.
I bet a lot of people looked up to him.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
So
Yes.
I did find the video. So you want to explain it
Okay.
a little first?
Okay, so my friend Mike Warden, who we shared a lot of, I'd find out something new and I'd immediately call Mike, wait to hear what I found out, and he knew how much Albion Brooks meant to me. So he hired somebody to make an AI version of one of Albion's photos,
And
and it blew me away.
we're
It
gonna
blew me
show what the question that came up earlier. How come no one smiles? Well, here you go. Well, it
Yeah,
didn't really work. Did it work?
that was the still photo of him
Yeah, I don't know what
smiling,
happened. The still photo,
but
it didn't.
there's a
Yeah,
video where he's actually smiling and talking and
yeah,
waving.
that was supposed to download like that. I don't know what happened. But
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
oh well.
Yeah,
I tried.
but to
Yeah.
see him smile, so yeah, it just gave me goosebumps that it looks like he's looking right at you, talking, and then smiling and waving, and it just,
Oh,
my
okay. I'll
heart
see.
skipped a beat.
Yeah. I'm gonna just see if I can actually. I don't know why that. Okay, this is it right here. Let me just try again. Ah, I got it. I see what happened. All right. But anyway, let's
Okay.
continue on. And so let's talk about the aftermath and just tell me what that was like, the aftermath of him, passing away. They brought his body up to Kingfield, Maine and buried him. And was there, was there any other talk about him after that? Was he in any books or anything like that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, but go back to right after he was killed, within a week, his brother William, the one who was
Mm-hmm.
injured at Fredericksburg, he got right on a train and was headed. He wanted to go down to Cold Harbor and get his body right away. But he writes. I have some diary entries of his. He's at the train station, and he said, "I'm sad, alone, in search of my dead brother."
Oh.
And
Mm.
so heart-wrenching. And Cold Harbor went on, the fighting went on in that area for a while, so he wasn't, by the time he got down there, I think the 8th Connecticut had pulled out, and he wasn't able to find the grave. There was no one there to tell him where it was. So they had to wait till after the war. But the family obviously never forgot him, because the mere fact that all of his letters, diaries, correspondence, everything was preserved, showed how important they thought he was.
Mm.
William's firstborn son he named Albion. Other
Mm.
family members had sons named Albion. There was even several generations later, there was a daughter named Albine, which I think was the female equivalent. So he was held in reverence
in the family.
in the
That's wonderful.
family.
Yeah.
Yes.
Do you think Albion would be happy that you did this?
I think in a way he chose me to do this,
Uh-huh.
in some bizarre way. Clearly, I'm a very different person from him.
Uh-huh.
Had I gone back in time, it would have been shock and awe.
Yeah.
you know, we're very different people, but in a way, we do share those different intellectual pursuits, and the way he writes, I just admire. I think he would have been happy with the way, I hope, that I did this, that I made it a personal thing. I didn't just reproduce his letters and say, here it is and here's the history. I think by me expressing the emotions I do in the book and the quest, I think it helped bring him to life a little more, fleshed him out as more of a person. I don't know. I'm biased,
Yeah.
but from what other people who have read the book told me, that they've never read a biography like this before, particularly of a soldier, that it was just something so new and different, because most people, for a biographer to put themselves in the biography is kind of heresy. Historian is not supposed to become part of the story, but
You are.
I and I have to thank my husband Bob for that, because when I'm like, how am I going to do this? I have all this material. What's the best way to do it? And he's like, well, you're part of the story for the last 30 years. And I was like, I can't do that. I can't put myself in the story. And then I realized that for me was going to be the best way to tell the story.
It is. It's a wonderful book.
Thank you.
Absolutely loving
Thank
it.
you.
Yeah. Just
Thank
really,
you.
really love it. And I love the adventure along the way. And, for someone to stumble upon something like this, it does feel like it was meant to be in that way. I mean, like, it's not an accident.
It doesn't seem, it seems like the original document collection fell into the right hands. I hope mine were the right hands for that. And because I have such a passion for history, you would do him an injustice if it was a cold, dispassionate biography, I think. And I owed it to him. I kept saying this, I never put so much pressure on myself for anything I've ever done. I was never so personally involved in it. And I kept saying, I owe it to him to do the best I can, to make it the most interesting, the most compelling, to do justice for, I spent 30 years, over 30 years now, on a man who barely made it to his 21st birthday. So I spent more time researching him
than he was alive.
than he was alive.
Wow. That's really something to think of it that way.
Yeah. So this meant so much to me, and it really means a lot to me that you have this interest and gave me this opportunity to speak about him.
Yeah. Well, it's been absolutely wonderful, and I hope people buy the book, because to me, it's one of my very favorite books that I've read about, anything like this. Definitely is. And yeah, it's really quite amazing. And you're such a great author as well on your other books I've read, and I just really, really enjoy your work so much. And I wish you good luck with this. And I don't know if there'll ever be another heart to this. I mean, I would almost think that it would be a letdown to try to go into another life like you did this. I mean, there's so few people that come along that are actually like this person was.
Yeah, there are
And
some
it's not
diaries
known.
missing, so if I find them, I will expand this book.
Mhm.
But I'm currently the original documents that I wrote about that 3 generations. In the last 30 years, I have learned so much more. So I'm working on expanding that. So, but as to getting into somebody's new biography, oof, I don't think I have another 30 years left in me to do that.
Yeah. Well, Linda, thank you so much. And it's been a
Thank
real
you.
pleasure. All right, everyone, thanks so much for being here tonight. And we'll be back sometime soon, hopefully, with another podcast on antiques. Always enjoy doing them. So you'll be hearing from us again. Take care.